Greetings and welcome to Code Quickie. Today, we're going to go ahead and look at building a simple app that can access Google Drive. Now, we're going to take a little overview of what's going on here. We're going to go ahead and deal with Google. We're talking about Google Drive, and Google Drive is maintained by Google, and it's for the everyday user to store their photos and videos. And guess what? You can use Google Drive has an API that you could go ahead and use the drive in a meaningful ways in your applications. And today we're going to express that with a web application. And what we're going to be using today is Angular. Now, Angular is the framework to use when it comes to developing web applications. Angular is scalable. It's maintained by Google as well as the Google APIs, which are also maintained by Google. So when you go ahead, you are using web applications with anything concerning Google or with anything at all, I highly recommend Angular. When it's time to they say that Angular is overload. Angular is a learning curve. I'll tell you right now, there's no overload when it comes to scalability and web design. We were talking about responsiveness. We were talking about adding new features. JavaScript by itself, it's controlful, is not designed for the coding that we have today. And Angular immediately gets rid of that issue. React won't allow that for you. React will allow for much more coding, much more searching, but Angular, everything is available and the concepts are available, right? So you don't have to use their APIs. You can read about their APIs, understand the concepts or understand the concepts that you need and apply them to your Angular projects to get anything and everything done for you. So once again, Angular is the web framework of choice. React, it's on its way down. It's on its way down. So back to the lab. Let's go ahead and download the web application. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead, click on this link, and we're going to end up in the repo. And we're going to go over to the folder, building a simple app that can access Google Drive. And want to go ahead and download my the Angular application where this thing is loaded, where the application is loaded. After we do so, what we want to do is go into our terminal and what I do is go and run npx ngserve ng. See if I can zoom in to, okay. Zoomed in a bit to the terminal. Should have opened the shell with the PowerShell, but that's okay. And we're going to use the C flag equals drive for into the little angular.json. That's where that reference is coming from, right? We're going to let the app set itself up. We're going to let the app build. And, while we're having this thing get into development mode, right, that was quick. I can't even explain what I wanted to say. That was so quick. The many reasons why when you're dealing with Angular and hot reload is that many people are not familiar with angular.json. I just wanted to just highlight about that, right? So we're dealing with angular.json. This is the configuration that we want to go ahead and work with in order to speed up definitely our reloads. And what we want to go ahead and do is definitely when you're in your development configuration, as you can see here, you might not recognize it, but this is the drive architect I was using, and I said npx ngserve -c equals drive. When you want to go right here, as you can see, right, the drive configuration serve drive browser target. Definitely, some things you want to do is optimization is false and source map is false. Well, source map is false, so you could go ahead and develop quicker, right? Source maps are for targeting where in your code, because on the website, right, all of these are not in specific files. All these are in one big JavaScript file, JavaScript file, right? And source maps allow you to indicate when you're actually doing development, where if the arrow is in this file, if the arrow is in such and such file. When the source maps are false, when source maps are disabled, right, then everything is in one big file and there's no extra work of the transpiler trying to have a map to separate out where they mapped out and they came from when you're in your IDE. So that's just a little overview. I wanted to talk about concerning the application, but this is the application ready to go, ready to sign out. So so we're gonna have the Drive access page. So Google Drive, obviously they don't let you just use their APIs like so. You want to authorize to get in, right? And now we want to go ahead and set up this application. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're going to go over to the source. We're going to go over to, in our annual application, we're going to go over to source. Then we're going to go over to app, and then we want to head over to our directives, and then we want to take a look at the print files directive. We go ahead and open like so, and now we are dealing with the print files application. Print files, and this is going to be printing the names of the files that we have in Google Drive. And we'll go ahead and take over a look at our drive. You can see that there are 3 files in our drive here. My files, a copy of files, a copy of files. Like the items, what's inside these files aren't important right now. What we just want to know is how our app can gain access to Google Drive and just get the main features of Google Drive, which is accessing its files. So what we want to go ahead and do is what we're ahead to do is we're going to go up and set our credentials, right? So we're going to copy this code, and for accessing the Drive API, our credentials are going to be here. Now, what we need to, all right, so now we have a credential set up, but as you can see, our credentials are given already, right? Our credentials are given already in environments. In environments, we have environment along with an application, something you don't see in React, right? And now for an environment where you can have several of these, say if instead like environment files, right? Say if you wanted to use Google Sheets instead of Google Drive, right? You can have a whole file, right, just dedicated to Google Sheets and so on. Right, so here we have environment.drive.dev, and here we're going to be placing our client and API keys, right? So how we're going to go ahead and get those client IDs and API keys, right? We need those to get into application. So what we want to go ahead and do is we want to head over to console. We want to head over to our link here. Right. And now once we're in console.developers.google.com, we want to go over to our credentials. Anytime you're dealing with credentials, always go to console.developers.google, not console cloud. Console cloud is where your APIs are. Console.developers, where the important stuff like the service account and credentials are. So what we're going to have to do is going to go ahead, create credentials, and there you go, API key. So what we want to go ahead and do is want to copy that key first, and then environment.drive, want to paste that API key, ready to go. Good. And now we want to go ahead and restrict key because with Google Cloud Platform, we are paying for things and we don't want hackers, at least if they get a hold of our API key, use anything. So we want to go ahead and do API restrictions, right? We just want to click on the created API key if need be. And then we want to head over to restrict key, API restrictions, restrict key, and then we want to select the API, and then we want to type in Drive for Google Drive API, and then save. It might take 5 minutes, right? So obviously, after you're setting up these restrictions on your credentials, you don't want to deploy right away. You definitely want to wait a while, a day or two, because Google Cloud Platform is a global platform, and just like with your domains and your websites and how all the DNSs have to get updated around the world, definitely want to wait, just wait on the good side to see all things are ready to go, especially in production. All right, so next thing we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and create our OAuth credentials. Request users consent so you can access the user's data. And that's what we're going to be doing here in this application, in this app. There's also other ways in other videos how we could go ahead and do things from our server. So if you have an application and we want to use our own Google Drive instead of put our data in their application, our data in their Google Drive, we could go ahead and use service accounts, but we'll save that for another video. Go ahead, OAuth client IDs, application type. It is a web application here. leave the name alone. And very, very important, very important. In order for your application to work, you need your domains here. So say if you have www.example.com, definitely want to add that domain or else it won't work. Also, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use our domain that we're using, our localhost domain, HTTP localhost, right? And now what we want to go ahead and do is create. Now there we go, we have our client. So now we have our client ID. We don't need the secret, but we need this client ID. All right, and now we take that, and in our environment.drive is that we have a client ID. Now, one more important thing we want to go ahead and do is that in our application, I'm using Chromium Edge. I know it's known as Microsoft Edge, but here I just like to call it Chromium Edge. I think the name sounds nice. It's a fitting name, and Chromium is the foundation for Edge, so Chromium Edge, right? And I'm just thinking about Firefox, even though they're secure and have their Rust API, Firefox let a lot of people go. And is it as supported? Is it as safeguarded? You know, so I like that Microsoft went with Chromium, Microsoft went with Google Chrome, you know, because Google Chrome has it's just bigger, and Chromium Edge, right? Just a little overview. I just like the name. I just want to see when I actually go ahead and search through my apps. I just want to see what that's about. I just want to see Chromium Edge instead of Microsoft Edge. So, right. So what we want to go ahead and do as well is we also want to clear our cache, especially when we're using different JavaScript origins, especially in web design and web development. An issue could come across is that sometimes half our issues come across because the cache is being used, right? In all the other applications where you write code, you deploy it, you're working with the code that you just deployed. Not with web design. When you write code and you deploy it, sometimes you have a cache, and depending on the cache on the browser, and depending on the cache settings of the browser too, right? It might not even have to depend on the browser. That cache can get really stubborn and can really get in your way, and it might cache certain parts of your application and might not cache other parts of your application. So at the end of it, you don't even know what you're looking at, and you spend hours debugging until you can get the cache to corroborate. So that's some of the issues, and what we want to do right now is to make sure cache is not one of those issues when we're dealing with this application. So here I'm in Microsoft Edge. I just want to go ahead, clear some browsing data, right? Cookies, browsing history. That doesn't have to, I don't want to get signed out really. Browsing history, I'll keep that around. But cache, images, and files, definitely just want to go ahead and clear that out, right? And even though sites load more slowly, for us as a developer, our sites are going to work, right? So now this site is going to work. We have our client ID, we have our API key, we have all of the backstage features cleared out the way. So let's go ahead and set up this application like it's supposed to, right? So now we have our credentials. Now what we want to go ahead and do is load the authorization SDK, right? So when so right now GAPI right now is our library, is our browser SDK connect to the Google API, and this is the code that we need to copy and paste it right here, like so. And right, so what we have here, just a little overview. We go get that browser client SDK. Then we want to initialize our connection, provide the API key, the client ID, the discovery docs. And I just want to go over the discovery docs before we go on. As you can see here, we have to tell Google API, hey, this is the API we want to go ahead and use, because Google API by itself is big, is massive, and you don't need all of it in your browser. It might slow it down. We're talking about gigs here. So we just go ahead and specify. Another thing with gigs, it tries to keep all its versions. You can see V1, V3. So there's several different versions of the same API in here. Google wants to keep it organized, obviously, for backward compatibility and for organizations that are going to have a tough time if they have to try to switch the APIs. So this is why we have discovery docs, right, to refer to which API, because our code is not ready to work. Our code is not ready to work unless we are authorized to use it. Okay, so yeah, before authorize, we don't want to have an overflow of all the whole API. It's too big. Just using what we need is like so. And now our scoped is for our application to work, right? So now what we want to do is just read the files, right? You just want to read metadata, drive metadata. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning of the episode of the lab, that we're just going to be reading file metadata and see what we're going to be doing. But this is the basic, the first steps to accessing Google Drive, right? So that's what our scopes are about. Scopes are like our roles, are like our permissions and our service accounts. And definitely when dealing with GCP platform, definitely want to know what those are. Right, they allow you to do anything. They allow this project to be possible. So now, right, we loaded up the SDK. Now what we want to go ahead and do is, now these are for our end users, sign in if needed. Let me get ahead and go sign in. Right, we ask if they're signed in. If they're not signed in, then they have to go sign in like so. Right, and now on the application refresh, hit authorize. And now what I want to go ahead and do is, this app isn't verified, and that's okay, but we could go ahead and advance to go to quick start like needed, allow view metadata for files in Google Drive, right? That was the scope I was talking about. And then we go ahead, click allow. And there you go. Resume. All right, so now our application is authorized. So now we basically have access to the Google Drive at this point. So what we go ahead and do is, now if we go ahead and listen, right, we want to listen for changes. So right, only show up when we are listening, only show up when we are signed in. So now our files in our drive, we really want to see them when we are signed in, as well as regular functionality as if we're already signed in, right? This listener is not going to be fired, right? So we just want this code, we would want to see this code again. And manifest is what is going to allow us to see that code. Okay, allows is going to, not the code, I'm sorry about that. It's going to allow us to see the files and use them as needed, right? So it's going to allow us to get those files. So now we're going to take this code, and for function for once files are in the app, we want to paste that manifest here, and now refresh the page. We want to just open up our developer console, hit the authorize button, right? And now, as you can see, there are our files, right? Or that file, reading that file metadata, right? So now I have the ID, and then we have the name. So as you can see here in my drive, my files, copy of my files, and copy of my files, like so. We have them here, and that's very good. That's very good for us. So now, like, say for example, we just want them to manifest in an application, right? We could go ahead and have this manifest in our application. These were supposed to represent the text that's here. I'll just go ahead and URI action, right? Now I'm just taking, all I'm doing is that I'm taking the references to these elements here, and now they're going to be replaced with the names of the file. So I'm going to go ahead and hit authorize, and now you can see it is updated like so. Very neat, very nice. Anything about Angular, definitely just love that responsiveness that goes around, right? You could see about React, right? A lot of coding that is involved in here, both Angular, right? Super smooth, super nice. But the point is that we could see the titles of our files. And now, say if we want our users to sign out, we could just go ahead and take this code. Let's go in the init constructor, sign out right here, right? And the important part is signing out and then changing all the files names to none, right? So now we're going to go ahead, authorize, we're just going to sign in, right? Get our files, and then if you sign out, right, they are back to none again. All right, and that's how we could go ahead and work with the Drive Access page. We're going to work Drive Access page in our lab right, to access files in Google Drive. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, most importantly, in the comments, if you need questions, if you have questions about Angular, #1 web framework, please use it, or working with Google API, please ask away. I love to connect with my audience. Thank you for watching.